Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Welcome and thank you for coming on a Saturday morning or Saturday noon. And as I'm sure you all know, we are studying Swami Prabhavananda's collection of talks published as the book Realizing God. And we're well along in the talk on silence. Before we begin, is there anything anyone would like to add or ask? Anything you'd like to make part of the discussion before we plunge into the text? All right. Try to meditate upon the truth that we are living in the city of Brahman. We live, move, and have our being in God. For those of you who know your Christian literature, know the Gospels of Christian, he's paraphrasing St. Paul there. We live, move, and have our being in God. Swami Vivekananda once said, "Seek not God, see Him." Seek not God, see Him. Now we have lots of instruction. We have lots of scripture and testimony of saints and so on, that wherever we look, wherever our eyes fall, we are seeing God. That there is nothing else. If we take the words omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent seriously, there can be nothing but the divine presence. So that's what Swami Prabhavananda is pointing to when he says, try to meditate upon the truth that we are living in the city of Brahman. In other words, this is all Brahman, wherever we look. We live, move, and have our being in God. Swami Vivekananda once said, seek not God, see Him. In other words, recollect the truth that we are told in the scriptures, that wherever our eyes fall, that is the very being of the divine presence. The Swami Prabhavananda goes on to say, He is right with you. He is your very self. You are never apart from Him. See Him, see Him, see Him. He is right with you. He is your very self. You are never apart from Him. See him, see him, see him. Now, let's take just a moment to note the gender. There is no gender in the divine presence, but we, because of the way we think, have subdivided, so to speak, the undividable into the divine feminine and the divine masculine. So if you prefer to see, if you prefer to think, you are never apart from her. See her, see her, see her. That's perfectly fine. There is nothing intended to indicate that the divine being is masculine, although it has these masculine forms, these masculine incarnations, and its feminine incarnations. When the sense of ego arises, we feel limited, finite, dry, lacking. Now let's just take that seriously, what the Swami is saying. That's the source of our sense of limitation, our sense of lack of freedom. It's only our own ego, our own sense of separateness. When the sense of ego arises, we feel limited, finite, dry, lacking. We want love, so we go outside. We want happiness, so we go outside. We form attachments to things and objects and persons that give us pleasure, and we consider them as separate from us. And also we feel aversion to things that give us suffering or pain. Our ignorance is so thick that we cling to life, thinking that it is reality. You know, ignorance is so sticky. If somebody this moment tried to give you ultimate knowledge, you'd shrink back. No, 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 I don't want it. If somebody this moment tried to give you ultimate knowledge, you'd shrink back. No, 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 I don't want it. Now let's just pause and see if there's any discussion about that particular assertion. Is there anything anyone would like to add from their own wisdom or experience, or any concern they'd like to raise about what's been said, or any question they'd like to ask?
Well, I certainly disagree. I mean, if somebody knowledgeable offered to give me ultimate knowledge, I would say, yes, 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 I do want it. I'm not sure I can agree with that. And when he had said, see him, see him, see him, I think it's worth remembering at the time he's speaking to an American audience who we generally like take the masculine form of God. So I think that he's kind of addressing that to the audience. But yeah, I can't. I don't know. Not sure I can agree with what he just said.
Thank you, Brahmadas. You're saying that if your guru comes to you and says, I'm going to confer knowledge and liberation, knowledge with capital K, and liberation, that you would say yes.
That is correct.
Good.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
why does he assume that we would say no? Why does the author or
This is Swami Prabhavananda.
Yeah, the Swami, I can't say the last name, but Swami, why does he assume, or that we would not want it? Does he elaborate on that?
Because that is his experience. Uh, he's very experienced. He came to the United States in 1925 and immediately began to study the people that he would be serving. And he found that their attachment to life, their desire to cling to life was so great that though there were opportunity after opportunity after opportunity from great souls who could have conferred upon them this gift of ultimate knowledge, the ultimate reality, that they did shrink back from it. As a matter of fact, as Swami Ashokananda, the head of the Vedanta Society of Southern California, once remarked, when he told them what to do, including specific forms of meditation, he told not just one, but the entire congregation. You can find this story in the book A Heart Poured Out by Marie Louise Burke, Sister Gargi. He told them how to meditate. And if they did this, that they would achieve what they wanted. After some weeks, he said, and he was asking people whether they were doing what he said. And he heard their answers. He pounded on the rostrum one morning, pounded on the rostrum, and said, "Don't tell me you don't have time to meditate. You watch television." So they were seeking outside in the entertainment and information of television. Oh, but Swami, I watch the news, I take the news very seriously. All that kind of thing. So Swami Prabhavananda, Swami Ashokananda, the other Swamis, they knew from experience that they told people what to do to achieve this, and people didn't do it. So he's characterizing that rather dramatically as saying, no, 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 I don't want it. I want something else instead.
Is there any recording of what that specific meditation was?
As I say, read Marie Louise Burke's book, A Heart Poured Out, and you'll see what it was.
Oh, the actual meditation is in there?
I don't recall. It's been so long ago, Frank, but
Okay.
certainly, Ashokananda had his own, and it's in the Gita. It's in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. All the instructions are there. This is what we'll be talking about tomorrow when we talk about the yoga of devotion according to Sri Krishna in chapter 12 of the Gita. He's very specific about what to do. And he says, if you do, you will quickly come to me, which is achieving the ultimate reality. So Ashokananda's, he had his congregation and his students. I'm not certain that the specifics are in the book, but it wouldn't make any difference anyway. They wouldn't necessarily be applicable to each of us. But the instructions in their most direct form are in both the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, they're in the Bhagavad Gita, and for that matter, they're in the Christian Gospel. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. In other words, don't let anything else distract you. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you, all wisdom and all righteousness. So the instructions are there for us. That's a very good question, though, Frank, that you asked. Yeah, are the specifics there? Well, you can go read Marie-Louise Burke and see. It's a wonderful book to read, by the way. It's the story of her guru, Swami Ashokananda. A heart poured out.
The reason why I ask is very often when I meditate, I sit there and I'll say to myself, for example, seek ye first the kingdom of God. And I'll sit there and sincerely think to myself, what the hell does that mean? How do I do that? How does one go about that? So I kind of get stuck, like when I meditate, what am I supposed to be thinking or not thinking? What am I supposed to be focusing or not focusing? Focus on God.
Well,
What exactly does that mean? I get a little stuck.
well, we all do, Frank. This is not a limitation just of you. Whatever form of God appeals to you, or whatever else you truly love, make that the focus of your meditation. And just keep returning your attention to that over and over and over again, saying no to the other thoughts, not suppressing or repressing them, simply ignoring them. Just when they come, return your attention. Don't allow that to capture your attention. Return your attention to that which you have decided you're focusing on. That's the simple instruction of how to practice first contemplation, then concentration, then meditation. First, we contemplate until we decide what it is that we really want to focus on. Then we begin our process of concentration. And as that concentration matures and deepens, we go from concentration into meditation. So I know the objection is always raised, well, it sounds so simple, but it's not easy. No, of course it's not easy. It's not easy to excel at anything. We excel by constant and regular practice. That's the only way that we become excellent at anything. Thank you for raising those points, Frank. Anyone else?
Are you,
Anything?
Shankaraji?
Hello, Balakrishna.
I have a couple of things. The first thing is, see him, see him, see him. Does he mean it is intuitively you see the same Atma in every being? This is what that's what my understanding is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
No, of course you're right. You're absolutely right. There is only one. That's the truth that we're taught. There is only one. You can call it Atman, Brahman, Jesus. You can call it whatever you like. You can call it goat.
And the second thing, I remember we read in the same book, while we are meditating, Swami, I forgot which page it was, he said, in the beginnings of stages of the meditation, you may not see the picture of whoever you are concentrating, only just a little bit of outline here and there. But as the meditation gets progressive, actually you see the shape of everything so clearly. This is what the Swami explained, that I think it was sometime somewhere in meditation chapter or something like that.
I'm sure that you remember correctly. Yes, this is what I meant by practice, practice, practice. We begin, of course, we're not good at it when we start. We're not good at anything when we start. No matter what. I mean, just watch a child try to learn to walk. They fall down. Then they get up again, then they fall down. And that's true of a baby deer, it's true of a baby calf, it's true of a baby goat. It's true of a baby human. We're not good at anything when we start. But after a while, that child that couldn't walk is running all over the house, and you have to child-proof the house, because otherwise the child, out of its curiosity, will disrupt everything. So this is what Sri Ramakrishna looks forward to, is us becoming so good at running all around the house that he has to childproof the I'm stretching a metaphor too far, but in any event.
And I have one more thing, when Swami said no, 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 we have actual, this one with Sri Ramakrishna on the Kalpataru day. One of the household devotee keep asking him, when are you going to meet that experience? So Sri Ramakrishna on Kalpataru day, he touched him and he got that experience.
Mm-hmm.
He went home, but came back after 2 days, said, take this out, I cannot function. And
Yes.
he moved it. So this tells us we have to prepare with all the, the requirements before the God's grace would come on us and show the way.
Thank you for remembering that, Balakrishna. Yes, indeed, that did exactly happen. And what did the man mean by function? He meant continue with his outward directed, regular daily life. He was not yet willing to give that up. Is there anything wrong with him about that? No. There's nothing wrong. As Sri Ramakrishna says, everything happens at the proper time. So it isn't as if the man was wrong for coming back to Sri Ramakrishna and saying, I can't deal with this. I can't function, as you said. Very well remembered and very well said, all of it. Anything else from anyone? This is what we mean by studying together the art of spirituality. These are the points that need to be raised.
Brother Shankara, this is Fred.
Yes, Fred.
Hi, everyone.
Hello there.
I have to say this. I do understand what he's saying exactly, because I know that when I first started on the journey, things would happen. Like I would start seeing something and I didn't know what it was. And it, then I started feeling it was a blessing to do that. But then at the same time, it was a blessing. I then found myself worrying, well, gee, what if I try to go to sleep at night and I still am seeing this thing?
Uh-huh.
So I just wanted to confess that. I mean,
well, thank you, Fred. And
so I think if he did come to me and go, I'm going to zap you with something, I might be the one to go, well, wait a minute.
Yeah,
I can take care of my grandkids tomorrow or something.
exactly.
So anyway,
Exactly. And there is nothing wrong with that. The Swami is just presenting the ideal to us. He's saying it is our ignorance that keeps us from wanting it. We are immersed in this ignorance. Our ignorance is eons old. If the physicists are to believe, the astrophysicists are to be believed, in this dream of Brahman that started with what we call the Big Bang, at least the part of it that we can in any way see or measure, it started 14 billion years ago, 13.7 or so billion years ago. We emerged all of what now constitutes us as we sit here, emerged at that moment of the Big Bang. Swami Vivekananda explains this very carefully in Jnana Yoga. We are eons old, so our ignorance is very deep indeed. But it can be dispelled relatively quickly if we stop looking outside for happiness, satisfaction, and say, oh, I understand now, if we do indeed have that feeling, the futility of this. When you are truly tired of the relative world, you can sign off and head for home. And the instructions are there, but one has to really want that. No one will excel at anything unless they really want to. There simply won't be the motivation to do it. Does all that make sense? Good. Anything else from anyone? All right. The Swami says, this is now after the quote about no, I don't want it. Our ignorance is not our real nature, but is just something that has covered the reality like clouds covering the sun. The clouds are not permanent. A gust of wind removes them, and the sun is shining. Stilling the mind does not mean going to sleep, being unconscious, or not thinking anything. There is a difference between being unconscious, making the mind blank, and attaining samadhi, or the unlimited knowledge of God. When you are asleep, you are unconscious. But in samadhi, there is full consciousness, often called superconsciousness. And even that, there are steps along the way. Where you understand that you are succeeding at holding your attention within, and things happen. And in the silence and stillness of this, even just for a moment, something will burst through. And in that moment, you know the truth of it. You know it because it is absolutely unarguable. Now that is in your awareness. It is now a samskara. So you will return to it again and again. Eventually you will have what is called savikalpa samadhi, still within the kalpa, still within the time, space, and causation reality. But it will be an experience that there is nothing but the divine, and you are a part of that. Now, that's still only a partial realization. It's not the full knowledge, but it transforms you utterly because you have experienced the fact that the thou comes first and the I comes second, way second, as just a small part of that. And so you no longer have that same sense of yourself as a separate being that is not part of the divine reality. When you are asleep, you are unconscious, but in samadhi, there is full consciousness. The principles in the principle is in the waking state, arise one way. The principle is in the waking state, practicing meditation. The principle is in the waking state, raise one wave of thought to the exclusion of everything else. That's what I meant when I said that you experience there is nothing but the divine. That is the only thought that is in your awareness at the time. In other words, think of God no matter how you think of him. We cannot truly conceive of what God is, yet we all conceive in some way. We all conceive in some way or another. Recollectedness or meditation upon God doesn't just mean imagining things, but trying to see him, to feel the presence. And as far as I'm concerned, the Swami has left out a word here. Feel the living presence. That's his first instruction for meditation. Feel the living presence. That is the most important part of meditation, to feel that presence. He is here. I can't see him, but he is here. And he knows. He listens. That is a fact. Now, he knows, he listens. Who? The true being of your nature, which is within you always, as the Swami said earlier. You are never separate from it. Never, not for a moment. Your awareness may be separate from it. Your awareness may be directed elsewhere. But it is always there. So, and it knows, it listens. This is, as Sri Krishna describes the Atman in chapters 5 and 6 of the Gita. The witness. He knows, he listens. So the Swami says that is a fact. Practice, practice, practice. Give your whole life to him. And this is what we'll talk about tomorrow. What does it mean? Give your whole life to him. Give your whole life to him, and you are bound to succeed. This is an absolutely ironclad promise that Sri Krishna makes in chapter 12 of the Gita. If you give your whole life to him, he will quickly come to you. Any comments or questions? Anything?
Brother Shankara,
Yes.
on the fear of beating a dead horse, with what you just said about, giving your life to him,
Uh-huh.
again, I get stuck in my path, in my living of what does that look like? What do I do? What do I just go about my day and it's a mental thing? Am I doing something specific to my life to him? Like I still get stuck with what does that look like?
Well, Frank, first of all, we all get stuck. So don't feel like you're alone in this. Secondly, the instructions are there, very explicit in chapters 4, well, actually 3, 4, 5, and 6 in the Gita. Krishna gives very specific instructions. Tomorrow morning, in chapter 12, he gives a summary of what he said in those chapters. What it means is that you intentionally offer when you get up in the morning, you say, no matter how it seems to me, this day is thine. I offer everything of this day to you. And you can find on the website, along with the talk on selflessness, you can find a little prayer that if you wish to use it rather than write your own or devise your own, you can use that little prayer. It's called a Karma Yogi's prayer. And it's something, but it must be done every day. Then as you go through the day, you offer each activity as it arises. You're about to take some food, you offer the food. You don't take it until it's offered, and you waited for 3 or 4 minutes for it to be received. You can chant your mantra or say a prayer or whatever it is during that time, continuing to focus your attention on the divine. And then as that goes through the day, I mean, in chapter 5 of the Gita, Sri Krishna just gives this long list, which is as comprehensive as he can make it, of all the activities that we participate in. And he says, offer each of these to me. He even includes going to the bathroom. He specifically includes that. He uses the word excreting. So no exceptions, no ifs, ands, or buts, but only if you want to. If you're still not wanting to enough, there's nothing wrong with that. You can characterize that as being stuck if you like, but perhaps a more auspicious way to say it is I just don't have enough motivation yet, rather than saying stuck, which is somehow putting some blame on yourself. No, it's a matter of motivation. It's a matter of priority. What do we want? If we're not really, truly tired of this life of being, creating, doing, and sharing, which is just a quick summary of what we do as human beings. If we're not truly tired of this, there won't be enough motivation to really sign off and head for home. And you can characterize that in any way you like, not having enough motivation. But certainly don't say that something's wrong with you. No, there's nothing wrong with
Can I jump in and
you. Please.
say something about, I think I said something about this maybe last week or recently about just how important it is to be honest with ourselves about what we really want. And as far as my own honesty, one of the things that's led me to spiritual practice from way back is wanting things to be different than they are, not so much wanting to sign off and go somewhere else, because that's not what it's about. It's like when we started this class this morning, don't seek the divine, see the divine, and feel the divine, and taste the divine, and smell the divine. And it's not about finding anything as much as it's including everything, because there's nothing that's not God or the divine or Brahman. There is nothing. And I've always had to have a practice or modify my practice as I went along to be one that made that work for me, made that happen, made me feel not like, okay, I've been transported out of my miserable life, but my life isn't miserable. That's just a story I tell myself. I'm not including all these things. So offering the way I see offering a meal or offering the day or offering is not so much giving it to the divine who doesn't need it anyway, but is including the divine in this apparent experience I'm having. And that makes me feel happy. It just does. And I don't feel the need to go somewhere or sign off and go home. I may at some point. I will at some point, probably. But right now, I want to feel the divine here where I am, because that's the only place I can really be.
Well, how beautifully said, and how true. And it's true for you. And each of us is unique, and each of us will find our own way. This is not dogma. It's not dogma, sign off and head for home. That's just, for what Sri Chaitanya refers to as the weary soul. The soul who's just weary of being, doing, creating, sharing. But how beautifully said, Cindy. And I hope everyone heard you clearly, because that is definitely another of the ways to approach this, which Sri Ramakrishna refers to as vijnana, beyond just the knowledge of God and the exclusion of everything, neti. One includes, I love the word you used, includes the divine. Doesn't offer everything to the divine. This is a strategy or a system of tactics that Krishna does outline. It is a method, but it is only a method. And you described another, which is, according to Sri Ramakrishna, actually a higher form of understanding.
It's not really not offering, though, because I do that, but it's more like offering, your friends outside and you say, come in, have a cup of coffee. I just baked some chocolate chip cookies. You are offering this other being something that your material being has made and wants to share with them. It's in that spirit, but it's still offering.
Beautiful.
Just wanted to.
Very well, again, very well said. What a nice metaphor. Anything else from anyone?
Well, I remember a story. I think it is Swami, tells. I think it was in Karma Yoga. There was a saint who was, very well versed with all those things, and he is a jnani. So he goes to Bhiksha and he stops at one of the house, and the lady of the house says, "You have to wait. I'm taking care of my sick husband and I will come and help you. Don't get mad like what you did before you started of burning a crow because it annoyed you." So then he was so stunned how this lady knew whatever what I did before I started coming here. Then she tells me, "You go, there is a butcher in town, you go there and he will explain it to you." He goes to the butcher's place, and the butcher was very busy doing all his duties of cutting and giving the meat to everybody and all those things. After that, he takes him home and he says, "You have to wait. I have to take care of my sick mother and father." So he takes care of all these things, and then he comes and talks to this saint. All he said is, "All I do my duty as a prasad, as a arpana, as a devotion to the Lord. That is all I do." This was, Vivekananda's story. I think.
Yes, it is indeed in the collection of Swami's talks collected as Karma Yoga, and you retold it very well. And it is a very nice companion to the things that Cindy was saying. So thank you, Balakrishna. Anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankara, what
Yes.
is super consciousness in samadhi?
What is superconsciousness in samadhi? It cannot be described, dear.
Okay.
It is because, why? Because this superconsciousness, in that superconscious state, the mind, as we understand it, has been left behind or dissolved, or there are many ways of describing it. So there is no experiencer there. It is beyond description because there is no one to describe it. We have language, we have thoughts and concepts that give us the ability to attempt to describe a higher reality. The highest reality is indescribable because though one returns from it completely transformed, and I mean this time completely transformed, there is no, most people actually having attained that state of being don't even return to the body. The majority, we're told, of those who do attain that state and return to the body, and that body lasts only 21 days at the most. And a few, as Sri Ramakrishna says, retain this tiny thread of ego, of knowledge, or ego of love in order to teach. Otherwise, there would be no teachers. So, no true teachers, no teachers who knew the ultimate truth. So superconsciousness is not describable. It is attainable, but as Swami Prabhavananda used to say, when people would ask him a question very like you asked, he would say, "Well, first attain savikalpa samadhi, then we'll talk about nirvikalpa samadhi, which is another term for superconsciousness. So if we continue our practices and we are not impatient, this is one of the things, this is where Frank using the word stuck, there's an implication of impatience there. Now, is it wrong to be impatient? No, but it's just another distraction. It's just another way of distracting yourself from continuing with the practice. So, impatience doesn't do. Perseverance, patience, and then instead of impatience, expectation. The simple expectation that what I have been told will happen, that I will achieve this state of awareness where there is only the divine. That's all that I perceive. Now, that's still a perception. There's still an experiencer, the experience, and the experienced. But it is a very, very wonderful state. And it is accessible to every one of us.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
You're welcome, dear. Anything else, dears? So going on with what the Swami said, which ended the last paragraph I read, says, you're bound to succeed. The Swami goes on to say, it sounds very strange that I'm going to speak on silence. I wish we could go into silence, for only then could we really understand what it means. I am reminded of a pen picture as given by the great seer philosopher. I am reminded of a pen picture as given by a great seer philosopher, Shankara. He describes a teacher who is young, seated with his disciples who are old. They are seated under a tree in silence. All the doubts and superstitions in those old disciples are being removed by the silence of the great teacher. The disciples are said to be old because superstitions, traditions, and doubts are ancient. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I said, we are eons. All these things have come with this evolution of our being from something that is simply information in an incredibly hot state, which is referred to by astrophysicists as plasma and by the Vedic scriptures as Hiranyagarbha. Out of that information, everything condensed. So when he says ancient, that's what he means by ancient. It is not that only a few individuals are subject to doubt and superstition and tradition. This is what I meant when I said to Frank, don't feel as if you're alone. It is not that only a few individuals are subject to doubt and superstitions and tradition. All mankind is subject to them because we all condensed out of that same plasma, if we're to believe what that says. Only when the truth becomes revealed in the heart do all doubts cease to exist. And this, to answer the question asked earlier about superconsciousness. This is the dawn of the knowledge of Brahman or superconsciousness, as Swami says. Only when the truth becomes revealed in the heart do all doubts cease to exist. Now, revealed in the heart, that's an experience. That's savikalpa samadhi. When the truth becomes revealed, then all doubts cease to exist. Then the impediments to superconsciousness cease to exist. All of the knots of the heart are unloosed. But as Patanjali says, you're finished with self-effort at that point. There's nothing more that you can do. Something happens to you, he says. And you become that superconscious state, which leads to nirvikalpa samadhi and complete liberation. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. It's 11:50 or 12:56. Is there anything else anyone would like to ask or contribute? There have been some wonderful contributions and some wonderful questions. Anything else before we close?
Brother Shankara, this is Haima.
Yes, Haima.
I have something to share. Yesterday, I was listening to something. I found an author. His name is Jonathan Merritt. He's an award-winning writer for Atlantic magazine. He wrote a book called Learning to Speak to God from Scratch. I thought we have been doing that all this time. We've been learning to speak to God from scratch. Isn't that true?
Yes, it is. Exactly.
I thought that's it. That I would love to read that book, but
And
I just wanted to.
we start from wherever we are. That's what scratch is for each of us.
Yes, I just wanted to share with my friends, spiritual group.
And the thing, thank you so much. It sounds like a wonderful book. But the thing for us to remember is that none of us would be here on a Saturday afternoon if we didn't have that motivation. So everything that we can do to encourage it, to remind ourselves of it, everything that will carry us that much further along. And as has been said many times now over the last months, each of us is unique. This is why dogma doesn't work and why Swami Vivekananda decries it. He says there are these 4 ways of going about this predominantly. He calls them work, worship, psychic control, and philosophy. Each of them has their workbook. Your work, karma yoga, it's in the Gita and it's elsewhere. Worship, bhakti yoga, Narada's Bhakti Sutras, and many, many other, the Christian Gospels, many, many instructions. Psychic control, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and all of the elaboration on that. And then philosophy, Jnana Yoga, Advaita, we have Adi Shankaracharya, we have Vasishta, we have all the other great Advaita teachers. So there's something that can take us from scratch, as Haima just said, from wherever we are, some way along the path. Then we encounter teachers that speak to us more directly. We may encounter them in human form. We may encounter them in written form. We may encounter them as videos these days, but we will encounter them. Why? Because we're open to it and we're seeking it. And that will carry us a bit further along. And then finally, we begin to, the fountain of of truth within us becomes strong enough that our uniqueness begins to take its full shape and we carry ourselves forward. Anything
Also,
else?
Brother Shankara, go ahead.
No, no.
Also, Brother Shankara, I think we have also been scratching for authentic, that consciousness that has been contaminated and toxins. We have been scratching those toxins too, all this time while we were learning on this path of spirituality with you. You have been giving us the knowledge to scratch all the toxins, remove the toxins so we could go to the bottom, which is the consciousness, our true consciousness, the real divine within ourselves. So we've been doing that too.
Let's be a little careful with our language, though, Haima.
Yes.
I agree with what you're saying, but just this, consciousness can never be contaminated. It can only be covered up.
Covered, that's right. That's what we were scratching it, to remove all the covers, go to the bottom layer, which is the consciousness. That's what I mean. Sorry. Thank you so much for correcting.
Nothing to be sorry for.
Thanks for correcting.
I just didn't want to let that pass.
Sure.
Because consciousness is pure, undivided, absolutely uncontaminable. But our minds, for that matter, our whole mind-body complex, is contaminated, as you characterize it, and I like the word, toxins. Toxins. So like we, in a health sense, we purify our bodies of the toxins that are there. In the same sense, we do that with this spiritual study together. Anything else from anyone?
And to elaborate on what Haima said about getting to talk to God from scratch, the Swami mentions that here, and I think that's inspiring. He says, I can't see him, but he is here, and he knows, he listens. That is a fact. That tells me that, like, we can talk to God and he listens, even though we can't physically see him. He meaning, I believe our Ishta, how we see God, be it through Christ or Ramakrishna.
Exactly. And eventually you do begin to feel the living presence. And then in whatever way is appropriate to your uniqueness, to experience it, whether it's see it or hear it, or, in our uniqueness, we will have our own way of being in relationship with the divine, which is what Cindy was talking about so eloquently earlier. Anything else, dears? This has been wonderful. All right. So, Oma Sato Ma Satkamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya, Abir Moiti. Oh, dear beloved Lord, lead us from this realm of noisy confusion and misunderstanding to thy realm of silence and understanding. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through with thy everlasting, shining presence. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of our Mother and Father as the divine being. Any final thought from anyone?
The Atlanta Braves are winning the World Series.
Well,
So
there's a bulletin. That's wonderful. What is the
2-1 right now. The next game is tonight.
okay,
8 o'clock.
2-1. They're winning so far.
So far.
Well,
Still have to win 2 more to take it.
Good for them. These you talk about a model for us. These athletes that excel to the extent of playing in the World Series.
Oh yeah.
You can imagine how hard they practice and how motivated they must be, how dedicated they must be. Let that be a model for us. If we work as hard as they work, we will succeed. So Jai Shri Ramakrishna Jai Ma, Jai Shri Ramakrishna Jai Ma, Jai Shri Ramakrishna Jai Ma. Until tomorrow morning, for those of you who choose to join us, when we'll talk about Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, the yoga of devotion.
Thanks, brother.
Until then, sayonara.